You know how like you're at church and a preacher's speaking directly to you? She started talking about imposter syndrome and I was like, oh
Spotlight right here.
oh my gosh, that's me. And I remember calling a friend, the director of the nonprofit that I work with, and I said, I think I have imposter syndrome. And she was like, yeah, like all of us have imposter syndrome.
Welcome back. We are the Authentic Edge, and this episode, we're super excited to have the one and only Misti Williams, one of my dear friends. So, Misti, thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me, you two.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun one. Today, we're going to unpack and talk about imposter syndrome, which I think all of us at some point of our life have had, and Misti and I have unpacked a really good story for us to share. And yeah, Misti, how about maybe tell me a little bit about, actually, let's take a step back. Let's talk about our how we met. So why don't you start there?
Yeah, this is perfect for imposter syndrome, this story, because Jason and I go way back, like 8-9 years? I think we've been working together. And Jason worked for my parent company, Ronstad, when I was with Spherion, still with Spherion. And I just remember every engagement I had with Jason was like, I just looked up to him. He spoke a different language. He was like, playing at a higher level. And I always just thought like, oh, I wish I could work with him more. I wish he could mentor me. And for years, I worked with him on and off in like various accounts, like pursuits, business development. And one day I had this like prompting and like inclination, like I need to ask him to mentor me. And if you'll remember, Jason, when I called you, I couldn't even ask, like the words couldn't even come out of my mouth. Jason, can you mentor me? It went something like, I really, really like look up to you. And I think you're playing at a really high level. And I want to talk to you more. And he was like, are you asking me to mentor you? And I was like, yeah, exactly. Like I couldn't get the words out because I had imposter syndrome. Yeah. I thought Jason was playing at like such an incredibly high level. I didn't think like he would say yes, for one. And I knew him, like, of course he's kind, but I think I had this story in my head that why would he take the time to like help you succeed or to understand your, challenges? I had this already made up in my head. And even though that day I pushed past it and semi-asked you indirectly and you caught on to what I was throwing down, you embraced it. And then, of course, when we got mentoring, we dug into things just like this, like imposter syndrome. So.
And we'll dig into that quite a bit. And, I think from that conversation, what I took, the original one where you hinted like, hey, can you help me?
Yeah.
You mentioned that you were intimidated by me.
So intimidated.
That terrified me because
scared the shit out of me.
And that's terrifying, because I'm 5'7" and I shouldn't be intimidating to anybody. But I was like, oh, did I do something wrong to make somebody intimidated by me? So that one, I had to unpack myself to say, well, why was that? So help me understand why that was.
It really, truly was that I knew you were educated. You were working with Ronstad, which to me was, a higher caliber, more sophisticated company. I think that for me, it just felt like you were out of my league, that you were, I don't know, just more educated and more sophisticated. I don't know how else to put it, but I felt like there was a gap. And I felt like from where I was and where you were, and there was a gap. And I wanted to get into some of that gap and understand what you did, how you did it, what your benchmarks were. I just wanted to know more about you and how you overcome challenges. And I was just so curious and drawn to your energy. And you were always so helpful and so kind. So there wasn't a reason really to be intimidated. It was imposter syndrome telling me you didn't deserve like your attention, your help, your support, your mentorship.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's really the basis of it is that like belief in myself that I didn't deserve that, you
and
know?
imagine, if you will, a time where we didn't connect and we didn't do this.
I know. And there's so many, I mean, fast forward the journey, what we've been engaged for about 2 years on a more, consistent, regular basis. And there's so many things that I've uncovered that I've even, you guys, I hate to admit this, but I didn't know what imposter syndrome was until like 3 years ago. Like I never knew what it was. I maybe have heard the terminology. I never really knew what it was, but I was on a call with, I think like 200 women. And there was this woman in Utah who does a lot of data around women's statistics. Her name's Dr. Susan Madsen. And she, you know how like you're at church and a preacher's speaking directly to you? She started talking about imposter syndrome. And I was like,
Spotlight right here.
Oh my gosh, that's me. And I remember calling a friend, the director of the nonprofit that I work with. And I said, I think I have imposter syndrome. And she was like, yeah, like all of us have imposter syndrome. And I was like, it was the first time that I actually identified with kind of what I was feeling and experiencing. And then I realized like, I'm not alone. Everybody is experiencing it.
Yeah, I think that's a really big call out, is to realize that, you look to your left, you look to your right, and you have no idea what's going on in anybody else's head. And, the reason that Paul and I created this whole thing is so that we can have conversations like this with people that we go to battle with on the field every single day, and realize that, hey, gosh, you think I'm educated. Yeah, I have a college degree and I had a 2.7. It was fantastic. I played soccer, right? Education was an education. I got a degree. It's sitting right there. And I told you, I'm like, you can have that if you want, because I don't even use it anymore. Right.
They told me you would send it to me. I remember that.
Take it. So let's go back, because I think your story is so impactful that I want people to know you. So take it all the way back to the beginning. Maybe not so much like child, but like,
oh gosh, that's for a therapy session, which I do. I mean, I think it's really important because there's layers to this, and there's different reasons and complexities around, why we have some of this. And I think it's universal for all of us, but I think there's other things behind it that play into it. So for me, therapy is really helpful. But I mean, I think it's really important to start, when I was like a teenager, because that's really where my journey started getting, I was more aware of it for one, but I also became a mom. Like I was pregnant at the age of 16, and I had a baby, Landon, who's awesome at the age of 20. He's 29 now. But I had him when I was 17 years old. I got married right after I graduated high school, which is bananas. And then I had another child. So I had 2 children under the age of 20, which statistically, my trajectory of life it kind of seemed dim, right? We experienced poverty. I was in a relationship that was, unhealthy in a variety of ways. For me, being emotionally unintelligent, having stuff to heal, my ex-husband having stuff to heal. And we had a journey for like 13 years that was like challenging. Mm-hmm. So fast forward, through all of that, then I get a divorce in my, early mid 30s. And I found myself in the business world without a network. And I had my family, good support system. So I, have had a lot of success, but I found myself financially really struggling to independently support my kids. Like, on my own without any support, which was a journey. And what I realized, I remember being on an airplane, and I remember thinking, and I had a really great job at the time, but I was still really struggling. I got laid off 2 days after I said I wanted a divorce. So that was a week. That was a week, you guys.
Yeah.
But I remember and I traveled a lot for work, and I remember being on this airplane, and I remember, thinking I have to do everything in my power to be financially independent, which broke me away from this relationship because I was still really tied in financially to this relationship. It was almost like a control tool for this human to use against me. So I decided and made this decision, I'm going to be financially independent. And then I got laid off. So then I found myself on this trajectory that was very, not traditional, of like having to go back into the retail world. And then finally finding my groove in staffing and recruiting, which has been, 14 years of a journey now. And through that, I've learned just a ton about business relationships, networks, myself. I mean, I've grown, my priorities have changed. Financially used to be my tunnel because I made that commitment on the airplane that day of like, I am never going back to like depending on a man. And there was part of me that was like this fierce, like independent woman that, was like really driven in that regard. And I've softened a lot in those spaces that I do need help and we do need, other things. But yeah, it's been a journey. And so throughout this all, I went and got an associate's degree. I had graduated like high school with my medical assisting degree, and I thought I'd be a nurse. Like that was my space that I want to be in. And obviously I'm in staffing and recruiting. So it zigged and zagged. And sometimes I had to do things that I had to do out of survival and other things I could do now more out of mindfulness. So
100%. Yeah, that's amazing. And the reason I wanted you to preface that is because I want to tell you my journey with Misti, and it's very important. And it's something that I think others will get out of, at least to be vulnerable and open up. Right. So when I met you and I was going through those opportunities with you, I always looked at you like, this chick gets it. She's a badass. She goes out. She's fearless. She was dropping millions of dollars of gross margin a year for a company. And she was always saying like, well, what does your team do? I'm like, you're doing more than most of my team. So you're doing a great job. Keep doing it. And we explored potentially coming over to Ronstadt and through the process. And when we went to hey, let's mentor you, because it was a part of a group that we were doing.
Yeah.
And I started unpacking you. I was like, wow, this girl she's hung up on a few things that don't matter. And it's hard for somebody to get you to understand that without being offensive and asking the right questions. And you kept drilling the fact of, I'm going back to school. I'm going to go back to school. And I go, okay, why? And you said, because I feel less than. Mm-hmm. I feel like these people are smarter than me. And it's going to show that I'm a smart person. And I'm like, Misti, I'm telling you from somebody who works side by side with you, you don't need that. You're already doing what people are doing that have an education. So if it's something that you want to do from a personal perspective, right, I'm all for that. I mean, hell, you were going to climb Everest. Mm-hmm. This was like in the middle of COVID. She's like, I'm going to go climb Mount Everest. And I'm like, well, on purpose? Like this, what's going on? And then she's like, I'm going to go get a college degree. And there was always this, I'm going to go do something bigger than myself. And as we started unpacking with some questions, and then we started unpacking and I helped you help me understand more, it was always because people look down at me. Mm-hmm.
There's something like that was very ruminating in my mind, that if I didn't have an education, what I said wouldn't be as valid. It wouldn't be as validated. Yeah. And so I always felt like when I was in rooms, especially with, a lot of executives and in big boardrooms, where I remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I hope they don't look at my LinkedIn and find out I'm not educated. Yeah. Like there's part of me that would think, oh my gosh, if they looked at my LinkedIn or they figure out that I'm not good enough, they're going to stand up and be like, Misti doesn't have a bachelor degree, everybody. And I mean, I don't know what I thought was going to happen, but I did think that I would be shunned from some sort of society, or that I would be not taken seriously.
Has that ever happened?
No. And I've bombed some meetings. Like there's meetings where I'm like, I walk out and I'm like, I did not do that meeting justice. Like there's been times, and people, give grace and space. Not that my expectation of bombing it is different than theirs. Sure. But you have these standards, and I have these standards, and a lot of it I think was derived in like, I have to prove myself. I have to earn this. I can't be a single mom like on government assistance. And I got blinders on that were like, so anything around me that was not in my tunnel vision was like, I didn't care. So I focused so hard on like proving myself, which set me into like a lot of perfectionism. It set me into a lot of like overcompensation, right? Like a drive that was so to get myself out of being in any situation I don't want to be in. It became very funnel. And so sometimes I think back and I think I probably missed a lot in the peripheral because I was so focused. But here's the thing. Ultimately, I did achieve the goal that I wanted to achieve. Did other things probably suffer, like maybe spirituality or, some other components in my life to make the ecosystem fully whole and complete? Yeah, but I was focused and I achieved the goals that I wanted to achieve. But then once I got to the goals that I wanted to achieve financially, I was like, am I a donkey chasing a carrot? Like, where do I go from here? And do I even want to continue with those same goals and the same tunnel vision? 100% no. Like, I don't.
It's very much being a student of the game, right? Yeah. And you get to a certain spot and you're like, is this it? No, this can't be it. And continuously moving and continuously growing and challenging yourself and surrounding yourself with people who are a safe place to say, hey, you got this. And even if it's just to sit in the mud, or even if it's like you're going to stall for a little bit to help you think about the next direction to go. And when we were having the conversation about the college degree and we were talking about the conversations you were having with customers and you were still crushing it, destroying your quota every year, I was fortunate enough to get invited to Rebecca Henderson's retirement party. And at that retirement party, I found out, I think it was her daughters who talked about Rebecca Henderson was the CEO of $1 billion organization in Ronstadt SourceRight. Rebecca Henderson doesn't have a college degree.
Yeah.
And when I came back and I actually at her retirement, I'll never forget it. I said, hey, I'm begging for you to spend some time with my friend Misti, who's at Spirion. She's doesn't have a college degree. She does $2 million in gross margin a year. Would you spend some time with her? And she was like, of course. And we set up that call. And tell me about that call, because obviously you and I've talked about it, but tell me how she showed up to that call. And like, this is a really cool story.
I woke up just like today. Like I got up, I wanted to meditate. I wanted to like be in a good, frame of mind. And I got ready, like extra ready, like I was going out, on the town or something. And I had imposter syndrome, and Jason had sponsored and advocated for me. And I was like so excited. And I get on and I was like rigid and stiff and scared. And she gets on and she just got done doing maybe Pilates or yoga. I don't remember. But her hair's like in a messy bun on top of her head. She had just retired. So she was like, just living her best life. She stayed out until like 2:00 in the morning, I think the night before, and then went to Pilates, which says something about her, determination and discipline and character. Yeah. But she got on and she was like, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't even get dressed up. And I was like, I wish I had yoga pants on right now. And we started chatting, and it was so authentic and so genuine. And all of the things that I experienced with imposter syndrome and goals and recalculating and calibrating your goals, all the things she like fully understood because she had been there before. Right. Like, and she was exceptional. And she gave me some really, really great life advice about even, jumping to Ronstadt. I do well in my community because I love my immediate community. She said, Misti, if you leave and you go to Ronstadt, you're not going to be able to do some of those things anymore. So it really helped put in, and I was pretty driven. Like that tunnel vision was like, I'm going to Ronstadt. The next step is for me to be here to here to here. And then I realized I'm totally okay being an individual contributor, and I have autonomy, and the things that are really important to me to raise my family, I have intact. I wouldn't be able to do that. But Jason, I want to talk about something that I think is really important. When I started talking to you about imposter syndrome, it is very vulnerable because it feels like, hi, I'm Misty. I have low self-esteem. Like it feels embarrassing. Like it does feel shameful and there's guilt around it, especially when you've had it for a really long time. And that is something that I think imposter syndrome is really can grow and fester and thrive in is not talking about it. And I think when it got identified for me that I had imposter syndrome and that I was like, oh, there's 200 other women on here and they're all like liking and hearting and like, oh, I resonate with that. I was like, okay, there's people who've experienced it. Now I've read, books about it and I know I talked to other women about it. I don't know anybody who doesn't have it or has had it. And I don't think it ever goes away either. I think it's there and then you get to choose what to do with it, how for me in that moment of calling you and saying, Jason, like, indirectly, can you mentor me? Like that was pushing through imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Those little things can make a huge difference, but now I have more awareness around it, more education. I talk about it more freely. And also I have to tell you, and this is something that we need to talk more about. Women are told, since I was young, we don't talk about financial, circumstances with people. We don't talk about wages. We don't talk about, so we never know to benchmark ourselves. And I just constantly got told, do more, do more, do more, do more. And I always thought I'm not performing enough. Like I'm not doing good enough. I don't think I'm like, something must be wrong with me. When I started benchmarking myself and talking with Spherion employees and Ronstadt employees, I thought, all this time for a full decade, I've been thinking I'm not worthy or good enough. And I've been exceeding goals like for 13, 14 years.
So let's unpack that. Like, what would you give young Misty the advice now, being the badass that you are?
I just think find mentors, talk about it with other women, get involved in networking groups where you can have open, candid conversations about, performance. We all are in these rooms thinking we're not good enough and everybody feels that way. And when you dismantle and kind of crush that stereotype for yourself and be like, I'm scared to be here. I feel, this way or X way, or I don't know if I'm doing good enough at work, and I benchmark yourself. I think it's really just simply talking about it. I think it's engaging people in your industry, outside of your industry, and really understanding that, when you know that you're not alone and that you're not just some weirdo, like having some, moments of insecurity, then I think it does help you realize that we're all in this together. And I think it's really important for women to know men are really helpful and really supportive. Not all men, but a lot of men that really care about these issues, care about these topics, can help see a different angle and a different, viewpoint. You helped me through imposter syndrome more than any other human has ever helped me, even in therapy. So I think that's really important to have not only just women to talk about it, because that's our angle, we all experience it, but having the men's perspective, I think is really important from a mentorship.
I agree. I think there's value in cross mentors. I've learned a lot from you in just our conversations of how I need to pour into other folks, to other women. And I do feel like our time together was something that all you really needed was a little confidence. All you really needed was somebody to say, you're good enough. And that's, to me, like when I unpack your journey, it's always trying to show people that I am worthy. And when you have somebody that validates that, who isn't mom or dad or this or that, husband or spouse, because that's supposed to happen. And regardless, because as spouses, we're told, well, you have to say that. No, I really don't, but I do. I love you, right?
Yeah.
But when you look at career and you look at development, it's important to find somebody who, A, you're safe with, that is not abusing the vulnerability, but also saying, hey, let's unpack this. Why do you feel this way?
Yeah. No, I remember, like, I would be on calls with you and I'd be like, bawling, like ugly crying right here, sitting, which I think is, vulnerable, but it's not in person. But honestly, like saying some of the things out loud, one, you go, oh my gosh, do I really say that to myself? It makes me feel so sad. Like I would never say some of these things to you, Paul or Jason. Like, why am I saying this to myself? Why is that okay? But also, sharing that vulnerability with somebody else kind of dilutes the power of what you are saying. It makes it like, no, like you don't need to be saying that, but also it doesn't have as much power when you tell somebody. So, and I think that is really, really important. And probably the biggest aha moment for me is like, I had never shared that with anybody. Because I just was running around like a chicken with my head cut off, thinking I wasn't good enough. But, from the environment around me thinking, well, I need to perform more. And I'd go. And it was never good enough. But then when you start talking to people, you take a step back and go, wait a minute. I actually am performing really well, actually.
In all aspects.
In like across the board. Yeah. And then you realize like, you settle into your self-worth. But there's one thing about external validation that, is helpful to have somebody objectively or more unbiased look at that and tell you. But ultimately, we do need to have it come from within. When you benchmark yourself, when you talk about it, you're knowing, and your knowing grows. So instead of just telling yourself these things and ruminating and going over and over, I think it is awesome to have these conversations outside that are vulnerable that, makes you realize your value. That's Absolutely. The most important. My knowing is far more important than any external validation around me, although we do need that. And coming from, men and women and various, people in our lives, I think that's really important for harmony.
I remember there's a couple of things that are coming back to me now that are pretty fun topics to explore. But to what you just said about saying it out loud kind of takes the power away. Mm-hmm. You're basically diluting your head trash.
Yeah.
So you're taking that stuff, saying it out loud and going, that sounds ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because you hear it and it's not just what you're thinking.
You're so used to replaying it in your mind over and over again that it becomes a default. It's like an automatic negative thought. So when you do say it verbally out loud, honestly, there have been times where I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm never saying that again. I never want to say that again out loud because it's not okay.
And it's not true.
Anybody that, let alone just myself, who's just a genuinely, motivated mom who my roots are, I just wanted to be financially independent. Yeah. It all stems from that like motivation of just like providing for my kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it.
Let me ask you this, and I think you're going to remember this conversation very quickly. Yeah, this was a good one. This was one where I was like, oh, wow, she actually did it. There was a time where you couldn't say no to people.
Oh, yeah.
You just could not say no. And I think I got to the point where I was helping you and I finally said, Misty, you need to say no to somebody. You need to take something off your plate this week. And it needs to be something that... Say that again?
I thought that was an impossible ask. I was like, he's crazy. I don't know what I'm going to take off.
Do you remember what you took off?
I took off like 4 things, and I took off some commitments personally and some professional commitments. But I do remember being really resistant to that task. It was really, really hard for me. And the reason why, now knowing what I know, is because people pleasing and doing things for other people, when they asked me to do it, I said yes to everything, to be accommodating, to be helpful. And sometimes at the expense of my mental well-being, my physical well-being, I just took everything on.
Relationships around you too.
I never wanted to say no to anybody. And I still have a hard time with it, but I am so good at saying no now. I mean, it's
made you feel like that week when you took, I think that the first week you took off one thing, and then the second week it was like, I don't want to give the story, but you came back and you were like, I did it.
Do you remember what I took off? Because I don't.
I think it was you were volunteering or you were giving time to people. And I'm like, Misty, you don't have time to do that. And it's okay for you to say, hey, let's hit pause on this.
I never took that off my plate because I still do that for a decade. But I did maybe restructure and step away from like mentoring and taught workshops or something at the time.
It was something, you might have still done it, but you changed the frequency of it.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And I want to know how that made you feel, if you can recall, like, or now being able to say no to something, the pre Misty and now Misty saying, hey, it's just not the right time. I think that's something good to unpack for people.
I think I distinctly remember feeling like I was letting people down. When I started saying no to people, I was worried about their reaction. If I couldn't make a commitment, I would never. Here's the thing. If I make a commitment, I always follow through with the commitment. But now I'm really good at not making the commitment so that I don't feel this obligation to have to stick to the commitment. Because if I tell you I'm going to do something, I feel like it's really important to do it. Like no matter what, you committed to it. But now I'm really good about, resetting priorities. I think and reprioritizing and recalibrating is something that I'm better at looking at every single quarter. I used to do it like annually and go, okay, this is important to me. This isn't important to me. I'm going to participate here, but not participate here. I think it's important to have that maybe cadence even quicker, like quarterly, so that you're not doing things. You can get into things and then you're committed and it's like a snowball effect. It's hard to get out of. But now when I say no versus then, I feel a level of confidence, like no means no. I don't have to make an excuse about it. I don't have to tell you why I can't go. And this is not just like professionally, but personally. Like we have abundant lives and I'm super grateful for that. But I'm not going to lie, there got to be a point a couple of years ago, and even still, I still feel this fatigue of that people pleasing and all of that commitment and of, perfectionism and doing all the things. I still get stuck in that. And I think that's like something I'll always have to work on, but I do want to help all the people and I do want to participate everywhere because I do love certain initiatives and I do want to contribute.
You do that a lot. And when you are able to healthily say, I can't do it, I don't have time for it, that stops the head trash of saying, oh, you're a failure. And I would be interested to understand, like, what did it do for you mentally when you were able to do that?
It cleared up space. It cleared up room. When you have constant thoughts like that, I think that you're full. And I guess I'd picture it like, a garbage can almost, like putting more and more and more trash into it. And then kind of clearing some of that trash out gave you room to be more, like, I feel more creative. I feel more innovative. I feel more in charge of my own personal destiny, not like a leaf blowing in the wind and, wherever the wind takes you that day, kind of you go. It's more mindful. I was in survival mode for so long, like being a leaf blowing in the wind was like something I was very accustomed to. So breaking some of those patterns of, choosing for myself. And part of me didn't even think that I had the ability to choose for myself.
Yeah.
Because I was in survival mode or I didn't want to be, I don't know. I'm still trying to therapy all this stuff out, but I think a lot of it just was derived in just not good enough across the board. And a lot of women feel this. You're not skinny enough. You're not smart enough. You're not educated enough. You're not, articulate enough. I mean, all the enoughs, I think we all feel at times.
Yeah.
So trying to work through some of that, like foundationally and like where that stems from for me has been helpful in therapy, but it started here.
Yeah.
Like
my perspective from the Misty that I started with until the Misty now is you are so much more centered. And
I feel more grounded.
100%. Like you own everything now.
Yeah, I definitely feel more clarity. And I think some of that trash, getting out some of that trash helps you feel more creative and more clear, which does ground you. I'm really a lot more clear about trusting my intuition. I'm really clear about like, even, and this is a big thing too, because I used to get in a cycle of shame and guilt of like, you know, why do you feel this way and what's wrong with you? And then when I started having a little bit more compassion with myself, there was also an exercise you did, Jason. And I honestly had never, I mean, when you run and you're in that tunnel vision and you run and you never look back, you don't ever stop and take the time to reflect where you came from. And one time Jason had me do this exercise. He was like, I want you to think about like how far you've come from that 16-year-old pregnant, you know, scared teenage mom. I want you to stop and think about where you've come and how far you've come. And I had never done that. I mean, this was 2 years ago. And I mean, I'm almost 50. Like, I never looked back. I never stopped and go, Misty, holy shit, you not only did you survive, but you thrived. You help other women. You pay it forward. You care about your community. You care about, you know, other people, and that you know, and I'm so proud of so many of the accomplishments that I've made. And it wasn't just about like the money. It was about all the other pieces. The money was great. And I'm super grateful to be able to provide for my families, you know, independently and successfully, but holy cow, it's about all the other things on the way up. I never pulled the ladder up.
And well, that's a good point. I don't think you ever climbed the ladder. That's not how I look at it. I look at it as your journey.
Yeah.
And you always were just afraid to look back because you thought it was going to catch up to you.
Yeah.
And I think it was just the perspective of saying, you don't know how to go backwards. So you're not going to allow that to happen.
I was also scared to go backwards.
It's totally fair.
I didn't want to stop and look.
That was just head trash.
Yeah.
Now you can go, oh, you know what? I've made an impact on people the whole time.
But imposter syndrome will tell you it's not a big enough impact.
I totally get it. And that's why we're talking about it, because your story is so powerful and your journey is so powerful that others need to hear it. And as you're mentoring people and as you're going through the business world and everything else, to be able to sit back and go, hey, let me share with you some stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, I come from a place of having, I don't know why I'm giving you advice. I don't have any, you know, education in this. I just care about people. Right. Mm-hmm. And I've gone through my journey the whole way and go, well, you made a good impact on people. And there's the phrase out there, you know, fake it till you make it. I don't buy that at all. I say, you know, do it until you become it.
Yeah.
And just keep going forward. And if you have good
how you make it is so exhausting.
It is. It's exhausting. So and that's imposter syndrome, because if you have to fake it, you're never going to make it.
Can we just say, let's never say fake it till you make it anymore? Like, that needs to be dismantled, because it is, I mean, there are definitely times where you fake it till you make it, and it's exhausting because you're not being authentic. And you could just be being authentic and it could be more powerful. It would be more powerful. It is more powerful.
Yeah. How about
just be authentic until you achieve whatever you want to achieve.
Yeah. Step out, get out of your comfort zone. Yeah. It's not faking it. That's stepping out of your comfort zone. And then you're educating, you're learning, you're growing, you're falling down, you're skinning your knees, you're getting back up.
Yeah.
And now you get to look back and go, that was a kick-ass journey.
Yeah.
It wasn't always fun. It wasn't always easy. It was terrifying. But now you're standing on that mountain going, I did do it. Now what? Yeah. Is there another? You gotta go climb Everest, because it got canceled because of stupid COVID, I think. But
I definitely, it's on my list still to do, but now there's some environmental issues that I think, I don't know.
I have heard that. Yeah. Well,
that's okay. There are other mountains to climb, but mostly the reason why I like to do that stuff, like triathlons, and I do like a physical challenge and something that I set my mind to, because I feel really creative in that space. And it keeps me focused and disciplined. And then I'm a better mom, and I'm a better employee, and I'm a better, I'm just a better human. I'm a tolerable, like, human going through.
Paul, you want to say something?
I was going to ask Misty, what's your viewpoint now on imposter syndrome, meaning how you view it in the world today? Meaning, right? I mean, like on this podcast, and maybe we'll talk about it depending on timing. But what do you have Jason and I ever experienced or been in imposter syndrome in our career, in our life? How do you view it when you get into a room of people, both virtually and in person? And now that you know and have overcome a lot of it in a lot of ways, but still we're all on our own journey, how do you view how many people out there have imposter syndrome? Yeah,
that's a good question. I view it with more compassion than I did originally. When I was on that call with Dr. Susan Madsen, I immediately started judging that I had imposter syndrome and what's wrong with you and why did you get like this and why didn't you take care of it in therapy 10 years ago or whatever? Like, I just started being really hard on myself. And I've come a long way because compassion is more helpful for me to process. And even I had imposter syndrome getting on here today. Like, I shouldn't be talking about imposter syndrome, but I did it anyway. And it's not as hard for me to do it now because I know it's not the end of the world. You're not going to stand up and be like, Misty's not educated, whatever I had in my mind.
I mean, this is the reason why I'm asking partially is, I think everybody has imposter syndrome. And I think that the first thing everybody might want to think about, and I've just come to this conclusion not that long ago myself within the last few years. And I'll give a couple examples. One is to resonate with you. I first went to college and dropped out after 2 years and started my career and just jumped in with both feet because, similar to you, money hungry, grew up very poor. And a certain amount of years into my career, I never felt imposter syndrome about not having a degree, but I did feel imposter syndrome about being able to get where I wanted to go in my career without the degree, that I wouldn't get that opportunity. So I did a version of what you did. I did it online in my case, because I was full-time and also had 2 kids by that point. And, I did it really to check the box. I didn't feel imposter syndrome of not having the education because I felt like I had great business acumen already. But I did believe it would hold me back when I got into certain conversations. So I stayed up all night, every day after work, doing the work, got the degree, just really to check the box. But my imposter syndrome was there, and it was relating to the fact that I felt like it would hold me back in my career. But I also never got asked it. So it's it's this element that was all in my mind. And again, I say that because the thing to think about potentially, and what I've come to realize is, as I go into any given room, including up to a CEO and a board level, is every one of them have imposter syndrome about something. And once I realize that, it's like realizing everybody may or may not have pants on. And it makes me feel much better so that I could just go, all I need to do is know that I am the best I possibly can be, which gives me that level of certainty and the level of equanimity to be able to then go, I can enter any room in a t-shirt, even if they're all in suits, and not feel deficient because I'm centered around that. So again, I think just maybe everybody, depending on how everybody's mind works, because there's different elements, is just assuming, hey, everybody has imposter syndrome about something. They felt deficient about something in their life, career, family. They may be the best at their career and their family's falling apart. They may be great at their career, but their finances are falling apart. But the most important piece is just that everybody has something, and realizing that, I think, is a position of power, and just something that, I thought that's maybe something to think about if you haven't that way. But that reframing piece for everybody, and we're all on that journey, right? Like doing new things in my career where I'm at is, even this podcast, me and Jason, right? Not that long ago, how do you record a podcast? How do you edit a podcast? How do you put one out? How do you make it look really good? How do you do the graphics and design? That's neither one of our strengths. Again, all imposter syndrome. Like,
not gonna lie,
everybody's done it. There's people out there so realizing everybody has imposter syndrome, to me, gives me like a little warm and fuzzy, like, oh, like then it's just now, it doesn't really matter what it is. You got to go figure it out.
To your
I love
point,
that.
point, Paul, when we started this thing, I was like, who the hell is going to listen to me talk on a podcast? Like, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to make any impact here. Nobody's going to take time to watch this. They're watching Rogan or they're watching other people. They're not going to sit down here. And now when I'm talking to people about it, especially even some of the Gen Zs, and I'm telling them about it, they're like, this is exactly what we need.
It's connection.
And,
so,
yeah.
I don't know if that resonates with you, Misty, but I just thought I would ask, like, as you now look out into a room of people, let's say, like, how many of you think have imposter syndrome? And does it make you feel any better to know that they probably all do?
Yeah. So, Paul, that's so true. And not only do I have compassion for more myself, but you do have compassion knowing that other people have that same kind of vulnerability. I sit on an executive board for a nonprofit and now chairman of the board, and every person in that room, I remember not wanting to get on that board. I remember telling Joel Cannon, I'm not going to that. Like, I don't have any skill set to be on a board. And he's like, oh, really? We eat breakfast and it's not that bad. I mean, there's a lot that goes into being on a board and running an executive, team, but I could never imagine myself now being the chairman of the board if I didn't take that step and have, just kind of to overcome that. But it does give me more compassion for people on the board because I know all of them and they all have life. Life is lifing all of them.
Yep.
Regardless of like their status, their title, their income, they all are experiencing life and all of them experience challenges. So you're absolutely right. Nail on the head there.
It's interesting when you think about imposter syndrome, and it's very easy to say this. And I know that if you have imposter syndrome or you're dealing with it, it's much harder to do it. But when you recognize that it is head trash and you tell yourself or you convince yourself to be comfortable in the uncomfortable, you start to understand, no, I can do this.
Yeah.
And it might be one step. It might be that first thing that starts. And I do feel you made a really, really good comment earlier that as somebody with imposter syndrome, you need an accountability partner that you can tell things to say, hey, how did it go?
Yeah.
Did you go forward? Did you go backwards? Where are you at? And not judging, like, okay, what can we do? Like when you and I talk, Misty, I'm going to hack your computer and I'm going to wipe your whole calendar clean unless you take one thing off of the plate this week and tell me how it made you feel.
Yeah.
And just to watch you go, oh my gosh, I had time. I went and I forgot what you said you did. Maybe you went with a walk with your kid, or it was like, I centered myself again. And it's just it's a very powerful thing to get rid of the head trash.
Yeah, agreed. And just to take back your time, just to take back and reprioritize. Like we create these goals and then we run and we go. And it's okay to reprioritize and recalibrate of like what you need now, which changes, and it's all changed. It's changed for all of us. So even post-pandemic, like a lot has changed. We reprioritized a lot of things and what's important to us. And I think it's okay to do that more frequently, right? Check in with yourself. What do I need? What do I need right now? And that changes often. So it's okay to listen to that and hear what you need and actually give yourself some grace to like take a nap. Like I used to judge nappers. I used to and I come from my husband's family's Italian and they nap. Like it's an art for them. And we're in Italy and the time it's like 1:00 until like 4:00, the towns are dead. And I remember just thinking, don't people have stuff to do? Like I would sit outside and like nobody's out there. And I'm like, there's stuff to do. I'm never going to take a nap. I judged nappers. And now I've learned how to nap once in a while. And it's like, I'm grateful for that. My body needs to slow down. I can't run so hard and so fast like I did since I was 16. It's exhausting.
Yeah. I mean, it's that
to
It's
yourself.
that saying, I don't think there's anybody that laid on their deathbed and said, I wish I worked harder.
Yeah.
I tell my dad that all the time, Jason. That's my saying to him.
Wish I spent more time at work. Like,
I wish I would have spent more time at the office. You're not
Right.
wrong.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Well, I think, go ahead, Paul.
Oh, I was going to say, I can run through the quick recap. So Misty, we started doing this just one episode ago. We'll probably have different show notes, but you want me to run? I'll run through the highlights, just my rough draft notes, since we're all business people. It's the way of the world, right? And then we'll do another final closeout. And so here's a couple of the themes that stood out just as I was writing and hearing both your stories. So what we just talked about, most people have imposter syndrome. So realize that, whether it's education, financial, physical, something. A good quote maybe from Mel Robbins, whoever hasn't read that book, is start before you're ready. Don't prepare, just begin. And Misty's embodied that. The next one, there's 4 themes. This is the second one. What and when is enough? So early in the conversation, the question of financial, title, individual contributor, all those things, but asking yourself that word, what is enough for you individually? And an impact too, right? Accomplishments. So perfection is the enemy of progress there. Be bold and talk about it. So ask those questions, verbalize it, because you might surprise yourself with how you're talking to yourself, as Misty was describing. But ask the questions, seek out mentors, specifically ones that build you up and give you perspective, because those are the most important. And the final one is really all about benchmarking. So getting a reality check. Once you do that, you might find out, man or woman, you might find out that you're doing much better than you thought. So there's that element. But review how far you've come and give yourself credit. And then also give yourself grace, possibly even take a nap. And then ruthlessly, especially going forward, recalibrate, reprioritize on a regular basis. That will help reset you. And those are maybe the 4 themes. So I'll review it, but those are the ones that stuck out to me as I was taking notes.
You crushed those notes. Yeah.
Yeah, killed it. So, all right. So as we wrap up the 49-ish minutes that we've been on, Misty, I would love for you to give the audience, especially the ones that are dealing with imposter syndrome, just a little nugget from somebody who is still working, but conquering and thriving now. So what's your little nugget to those folks out there that are like,
Ooh, if I had to give one piece of just like advice that I think is helpful, is just talk about it. You're not by yourself. Just talk about it. Talk about your salary, talk about your goals, talk about your dreams, talk about your challenges. And I just don't think you can go wrong when you are vulnerable. So I say, talk about it.
Communication's key, right? And with respects to imposter syndrome, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Go find your joy.
That's your nugget. Paul, what's your number one piece of advice?
I would say ask your I like the scenario of asking when is enough. To me, that's a huge one, especially for, I think, all of us on this call, but broadly in business and in sales are typically money driven for a lot of different reasons, but that's that. And there's a really great book that I was given by a mentor not that long ago that it's called The Psychology of Money. And in that book, that's specifically what is asked. Have you asked yourself what is enough? And I don't know, I think you said that, Misty, which is realizing that when is enough, it changes your whole dynamic too. So for me, that was a big standout.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's great advice.
All right.
Well, another episode in the books. Thanks to everybody for listening. Misty, so good to see your face. This is just the beginning of what I know to be a thriving career, thriving life, and I'm excited to see what you conquer next. So thanks for being here.
I'm so excited. Thank you for having me. Thanks for sharing a glimpse in my story, and thanks, Jason, for participating in my journey. So, Paul, it's a pleasure.
Yes.
I wish you the very best.
All right.
Stay on. We're going to shut off now.
Thanks.